Welcome back, grade 11 with Unit 1 North Star Exploring Genius. Today we're going to do focus on speaking. Yeah, and first thing that we're going to do is we're going to start with the vocabulary. And this is a review of basically all the words that we've been talking about so far in Unit 1. Okay, here you see a chart. Boy, I love charts. It is divided by 4 columns: noun, verb, adjective, and adverb. Now, I do not really want to ask you what a noun is, because I believe you already know. Yeah. And then we've got a verb, of course, and then we've got adjective and adverb. Now, an adjective modifies a noun. It explains and adds information to a noun. Whereas an adverb, we have the word verb in this word. Adverb modifies a verb. It explains a verb. Okay, that's it. Means that we're going to look at POS, part of speech. Okay. Let's look at this chart. It has different forms of the verbs. So what I'd like you to do is fill it out. I'd like to do number 1, or the first one, with you. We have the noun achievement. The word achievement in verb form would be, of course, achieve. We do not have it in the form of an adjective or an adverb. Let's try the second one, confidence. As a verb, confide. Awesome. As an adjective, confident. And as an adverb, confidently. Yeah, with a li at the end. Awesome. Okay, I want to ask you to do the rest by yourself. You can pause your video and answer that. Go ahead. Awesome beans. Now we continue with number 2. Here we have a talk going on. It's a conversation between a woman and her doctor by circling the correct word form. I'd like you to look at it and point out which is correct. So you're completing this conversation, okay? So basically, while you're reading it, you would have to figure out between the 2 options which word is better. Not the word is the same, but the verb form is different. Yeah, the part of speech is different. Let's try the beginning together. Good morning, doctor. I have newborn identical twins, and I want to make sure I treat them differently because I want them each to achieve their full potential. Can you advise me? Now, which out of these 2 is the correct one in the context of this sentence? What do you think? Yeah, cool. Of course, achieve. I want them to achieve their full potential. Can you advise me? Okay, you are going to complete the rest of the conversation circling the correct POS for that sentence and that context. Go ahead. That brings us to expand. Read the opinions of 3 researchers about how people become geniuses. Then match the words in bold with the definitions from the same column. How do people become geniuses? 3 researchers offer their opinion. So we've got some people are born geniuses. Another one is everybody is full of potential. The other one is geniuses are born and made. Now, so you're going to read each view, and then as you can see here, you have number 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, these bold-faced words, and that is connected to A, B, C, D, E. Now, how can I connect, for example, number 1, inherit? Is that A, B, C, D, or E? What do you think? D, yeah. Get from one of your parents. So you would write number 1 right here. Okay, and then you continue here, and then you do the last column. Okay, pause your video to read this and figure out which word belongs to what definition as a review of vocabulary. Go ahead. Create. Okay, I'd like you to read the news article about a school's financial challenge. Seaborough Middle School News. Okay, I'm gonna give you some time to read this. So you have to pause your video. Now, as you have read this article, it would have been really smart if you did also annotate. In our last video, we talked about annotating. Remember that? When you underline, circle, or highlight all the keywords. By reading this, you could have done that straight away. And it helps you to better understand the text, follow, but also it helps you when you have to look back at the text. Okay? It brings you really good focus. It gives you that. Okay, that brings us to number 2. I would like you to think about this. Should the school invest the money in the strongest students or in the weakest? And what would be the benefits of each approach? So what do you think? Invest in the strongest students or the weakest? And whichever you choose, what would be the benefit? If I would invest, or the school would invest more in the strongest students, what would be the benefit? And if they would invest more in the weakest students, what would then be the benefit? I'd like you to write that down, and in our next Zoom meeting, we will discuss that. Okay? Please write down what you choose and write down the benefits for that choice. Go ahead. Okay, that brings us to grammar. I would like you to look at this picture first. Here you see a teacher standing, beautiful blackboard, and a smart kiddo who is writing a math sum formula on the board. But pay close attention to the face of the teacher. That is something. And it almost looks like this kid has a grin on his face. Like, I got this. I am outsmarting my teacher right now. Okay, in this cartoon, a boy is showing his teacher how to solve a complex math problem. Most likely, he has been taught to solve this kind of problem at home, not at school. The teacher is surprised when the boy gives his explanation. Okay, we see here several bold-faced phrases. Has been taught and is surprised. So the emphasis lies on those phrases to build meaning in this context. But if we're looking at the grammar of it, we can see has been taught is a certain tense and is surprised. Okay, so we in this case are going to look at two things which are called active versus passive. Yeah, you have learned about this already probably last year or heard about it. So we have the active voice and we have the passive voice. Now, if we're looking at has been taught and is surprised, these are both the passive voice. Now, in this case, they can also be emphasized to emphasize on meaning, right? But what is important, what we're looking at right now, is our focus is on whether that is an active or passive voice. That moves us to the summary. In your ebook, you can also see a clear summary of this material, yeah? Now, the active voice is when the focus is on the performer, and that is always the subject. So the passive voice would be the boy, the girl, or name of a person, the hospital, or whatever noun, which in that case, whatever subject begins that sentence, and the focus is on the subject. When we're talking about the passive voice, we're focusing on the receiver or on the action itself, and that means that we're focusing on the object that mostly comes close to the middle or end of a sentence. Okay? Now, forming the passive voice, to inform the passive, use the correct form of be. Now, going from active to passive, active would be the children are studying math. So the focus is on the children, are is the verb, are studying is the verb, and then math is the object. If I would change that to the passive voice, it would be math is studied by the children. Okay, so then suddenly my focus lies on math, which was actually the object, becomes then the subject. Okay, that is the passive voice. Now, when we are changing something into a passive voice, we will always have to use the verb be. But we have the verb be in different forms. The verb be in the present would be am, is, are. In the past would be was, were. In the continuous tense, it is being. In the perfect tense, it's been. And in the future tense, it is be. And we always add will, right? Okay, so to form the passive, you have to use the correct form of the verb be. Yeah, is that going to be present, past, continuous, perfect, or future? Plus, you add a past participle, which is also verb 3. Remember verb 1, verb 2, verb 3. Now, the last one, verb 3, is the past participle. If the agent of the action is known and important, so that means who does it, yeah, that's mostly the subject, then you can use the by phrase. So, for example, if I would say the students study math, math is studied would already be correct, but I could add by the students. Math is studied by the students. You don't always have to add that. With modals like can, may, and should, for example, you have to use the base form of the past participle, means you always use the verb be as just be, and then the past participle. Let's look at the examples. The active voice, many parents encourage their children to explore different interests. So here the focus is on parents as the subject. Yeah. That will be changed into, and here the object is the children, right? That will change, the object goes to the beginning. So some children are encouraged by their parents to take up sports or hobbies. Now, are encouraged by, why do we use are? Because this sentence in the active is in the present tense. Yeah, simple present tense. So we will add the verb be, as it says here, use the correct one. We will add the verb be, that is the present tense. That means we have to add am, is, or are. Now, in the case that our sentence in the passive is children, which is plural, more than one, means that we use the verb be. In the present, we use are. Some children are. We do not say some children is, or some children am. Cannot. So we would use some children. As you can see, the children here are the object, they become the subject. Yeah. So some children are, and then the word encourage, the verb encouraged, encourage has to become the past participle, verb 3. So you would have to know that, yeah. So the verb 1 is encouraged, verb 2 is encouraged, and verb 3, which is the past participle, is also encouraged. Stays the same. So some children are encouraged, and then we can add the by phrase, by their parents to take up sports. Or you could actually also say, some children are encouraged to take up sports or hobbies. Okay, now let's look at the second one. My parents didn't allow me to play sports until I finished my homework. Did not allow me. So that is the simple past tense. Did is the past. So simple past means that this will be the past perfect. Okay. Sorry, I say totally wrong. Not the past perfect. Did not allow. Not allowed means it wasn't allowed. Means it is it's the past tense. That's what I mean. So do allow, do not allow, did not allow. Okay. So my parents did not. You have to pay attention to the N and then the apostrophe T. So that's in the negative. Okay. So in this case, the object is I. So we start it with I, which becomes the beginning of our sentence. I wasn't allowed to play sports until I had finished my assignments. Now, we see here I was not allowed to play sports until I had finished. We have to look at that. Had finished my assignments. In this case, they add the word had. Because this word is in the simple past, that's why the passive will become the past perfect. Okay? Yes. because we have to change the verb form and then add the past participle. In this case, it becomes had finished. Correct. Now we go to the next one. Children can beat adults at some memory games. Can beat is the present tense. So, but this brings us to the model can. And with models, I just said we use the verb be as be and past participle. So adults can be beaten, past participle, by children at some memory game. Yeah, correct. Okay, so what are we gonna do next? Let's look at this. Using the passive voice, use the passive voice to shift focus. Now, I said that already, yeah? When the agent of the action, the focus of the action, who does it, we call it often the agent. That is active, right? But in the passive, we're focused on more the thing that is described, which is the action itself. Prodigies are admired by people all over the world. So it's, yeah. In this case, prodigies are more important than people all over the world, right? The focus is on prodigies. Use the passive voice when you do not know the agent of the action and when the agent is not important. News about the child, a violinist, is being reported in detail. In this case, it doesn't matter who is reporting the news in detail. Last, use the passive voice when you don't want to mention the agent, particularly to avoid blaming the agent. Some factual mistakes were made in the article about that young artist. She was 5 years old when she had an exhibition, not 4. We know who made the mistakes, but we don't wish to name that person. And also, the passive voice is often used in academic English. Correct. Okay, guys, if you're still confused about the passive voice, please look at your ebook. It has a very clear summary in it again. You could also already look it up through a search engine or just contact me to ask again. Okay, complete the radio reports with the passive voice using the verbs in the parentheses and the verb tenses indicated. So you will complete this. Prodigies from around the world. We're going to try to do number 1 together. Audiences around the world, and you have the word captivate, verb, and now you're going to use present perfect tense. Wow. And remember that this is done in the passive. Yeah. So you have to use a what is that? A verb be. So if you look at captivate in the present perfect, what does it lead us into? Audiences around the world have been captivated over the past 2 weeks. Okay. Have been captivated. Been is the form of the verb be in the perfect tense, as I said just now. In the perfect, it will be been. In the future, it will be right? And the present perfect always has have or has and then a past participle. This leads us that you have to understand what the tenses are. You need to know what the present tense is, the past tense is, present continuous, past continuous, present perfect, past perfect, future. Those are the basic ones that you need to know. There are like 16, but those 6 you definitely need to know. Okay, so if you're still confused what a present perfect is, you can just look it up on your search engine. Okay, a present perfect always uses have or has plus past participle, which is verb 3. Okay, so in this case, we have to use the present perfect, which is have or has, and past participle. But remember, this is in the passive form. So everything that is written in the passive form has to have some kind of verb be, right? So we have to put the right type of verb be in the present perfect. And for present perfect, the type of be is been. So that combined together becomes audiences around the world have been captivated over the past 2 weeks as Lang Lang, the Chinese pianist, performed his latest work. Lang Lang's recent concert. Now here we go. We have the word show and it must be a future tense. Now what verb of be is for the future. B. Correct. And then we have always your word will in it, right? Okay, cool. So we do show and we work with the word be and will. Yeah? Lang Lang's recent concert will be, and then of course the verb show has to become the past perfect, the past participle. Shown. Yes. So will be shown on public television next week. Yeah, so you're gonna look at the verb. This verb will definitely change into the verb 3, which is the past participle. And then if it comes to what type of verb be you need to add, that is the one according to this tense. In this case, it's future, so be plus will. And in this case, it's present perfect means been. Cool. And of course, you have to add have or has, depending. If it is singular, has. If it is plural, have. Awesome. Okay, and you're going to try number 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7. You can pause your video and try it out. Go ahead. Okay, cool. That brings us to the next part. Number 3. Oh, I'm going a little bit too far. Yeah. Okay, here we're going to complete the statement. So basically, this is also some kind of conversation going back and forth. Student A reads the statement, and then student B was supposed to respond to that. And you're going to do that by yourself, answering it. And through our Zoom meeting, we will do that together. Okay, so what is the correct response made by student B to response to student A's statement? You complete the sentence, you have to use the passive form of the verb and the correct verb tense, okay, that is indicated. So in this case, we have the word use, that is the verb use, so you will have to use the past participle for that, and it has to be written in the present tense. So the tense form should be present. So the verb form of be, the verb be, must be in the present. Now the example here is student A. Scientists use many different words to talk about nature and nurture. Student B. Yes, and even letters G and E are used to talk about genes and environment, and that means the same thing. So the word use changes into the past participle, verb 3, which is used. And then we have to formulate this by adding the verb be in the present form. That can be am, is, or are. But since we're using here referring to letters D and E is plural, more than one, so we use the verb be, are. Okay? So you got to think about that. Yeah, sometimes from a singular it becomes a plural, or from a plural it becomes a singular. Depends on how it is changed, where the subject becomes an object and the object becomes the subject. So you have to really look at whether it is still a singular or plural, or whether it changes. So that would change either the uses of am, is, are, or was, were. Okay, you can pause your video to do numbers 2 until 8. Awesome. Now that brings us to pronunciation, how we pronounce things and say things. It can be to reduce and to contract auxiliary verbs. Now, what are auxiliary verbs? Those are the verbs that we can also refer to as helping verbs. They help to make a sentence complete so it makes sense. Now, reducing means to lessen it, to shortening it. And that is what we do when we contract. When something is contracted, it's made smaller. Yeah? And reducing it means reducing in length. From being long, it becomes shorter. Now, that's why doing that, using contractions, we call that then a contraction. contracted verbs use an apostrophe. So, for example, here we see a clear example, I. So, I apostrophe VE would actually be, when it's not contracted, it would be I have been reading, but now it's I've been reading. We mostly use contractions like these in informal speaking and writing. Whenever we become more formal in our speaking and writing, well, in speaking we can still use contractions even though it's more formal, but in writing, especially academic writing, formal writing, you can never use contractions in your writing, okay? So fluent speakers often use those contractions of the verbs be and have after pronoun, and these contractions sounds just a little bit more friendly, less formal, sometimes brings us a bit closer to our audience and are easier to say than the full forms. For example, here we have, I've been reading about child prodigies, but my husband thinks there's no such thing. He's convinced that all children are equally talented. After nouns, auxiliary verbs are, have, and has have reduced pronunciations. R sounds like an and then ending. It is joined with preceding word. For example, scientists are interested in prodigies as often they will pronounce scientists are interested. So it's like attached to it, glued to it in a way. Have is pronounced like the preposition of. It is joined closely with the preceding word. For example, some have become world famous. Some have become. Some of. Yeah. Has is pronounced as like the long plural after some words. For example, the word genius has become difficult to define. Genius has become difficult to define. So it's kind of attached to it. And that might sometimes make it hard to understand or hear what a person is saying also. Okay, we're going to try it out. I'm going to turn on the audio. You listen to the sentences, and I'd like you to underline the helping verbs that are reduced. So the ones that have made shorter or attached to the formal word that is pronounced. Yeah? Let's try to do that. Listen and underline the auxiliary verbs that are reduced.
1.
The United States has become fascinated by prodigies.
2.
Americans are all aware that Einstein was a genius.
3.
Critics have warned that it's unhealthy to put too much pressure on children.
4.
Researchers are interested in studying children with unusual abilities.
Okay, good job. So, for example, number 1, what you would have underlined is the word has, right? Has with them more be attached to states. Okay, you answered number 2, 3, and 4. That brings us to the next one, number 2. You will listen to the paragraph about prodigies, and as you listen, fill in the auxiliary verb or contraction that you hear, and then read the paragraph out loud to just hear yourself say it, to also practice pronunciation. There we go.
Australian painting prodigy Alida Andre has captured the world's attention with her colorful work. However, people are often surprised when they hear that she is only 4 years old. The media have called her the youngest professional painter in the world. Alida's parents are artists themselves, and they've always encouraged their daughter to paint. They say she can spend hours working on a canvas. The public has responded enthusiastically to Alida's work. In fact, one of her paintings sold for $30,000. Some critics have called Alida's work surrealist abstract expressionism.
Okay. Now, you would have already answered it. I still give you a little bit of time to go over your answers. Go ahead. That brings us to the speaking skill. In many conversations or discussions, it is important to state your own opinion or viewpoints clearly and to do so politely. That way, listeners will be able to understand you and respect your ideas. Sometimes, however, you may wish to avoid giving an opinion. Sometimes it's just better to not express your opinion, either because you do not have one or maybe because you want to avoid an argument. In addition, you might sometimes need to indicate which ideas are the opinions of some people. So sometimes you also want to, while you're listening, you try to understand and grasp what someone else has said. And then in stating your own viewpoint, you could refer to what someone else had said before. Just like, or as John said just now, I agree because, you see, so you can also use the former view stated and add that to your own view, either continuing it, agreeing, or disagreeing, showing a contrast. Yeah, but it is important that you also indicate the idea of someone else. Now here in this table, it shows us stating your own opinion, like when you offer an opinion. For example, if you ask me in my opinion, well, as far as I know, as I see it, or for example, agree. I couldn't agree more. That's just what I was going to say. Or yes, exactly. Or disagreeing, maybe, perhaps, but you have a good point, but yes, but on the other hand, that's not exactly the way I see it, I think. Or not give an opinion. I'm not really sure. I don't know what to think. I haven't made up my mind. Or very informal, beats me. That is more like, you know what, I don't care. That we wouldn't use in more formal statements. But these are ways on how to show offering an opinion, agree, disagree, or not giving an opinion in a more respectful way. So reporting someone else's opinion, saying what somebody else said or thinks, that is not easy as well. Read the sentences about listenings 1 and 2. Notice the phrases that are used to introduce other people's opinions. For example, this one. David Schenk doesn't think there is a dividing line between high achievement and genius. He doesn't believe it is that important. 150 years ago, scientists were sure that nature and nurture were opposing forces. They were convinced that people were influenced by either their genes or their upbringing. Composer Sam Simon believes that Jay Greenberg is the most important musical prodigy in the last 200 years. And Scott Pelley couldn't agree more. He thinks Jay is amazing. See, in these examples, we can see that stating a view, also someone else's opinion or view is reported along with it. So these are just some examples. I'd like you to try to respond in the B section. Yeah, so you respond to the idea that is stated and use an expression from the box when you state your opinion. So the whole point is that you look back to this point, to this box, this table, and whether you offer an opinion, agree, disagree, or do not want to give an opinion, I'd like you to use these example phrases in order to respond to these statements and ideas. For instance, number 1, most child prodigies seem to be influenced by their parents. And an example could be, I think so too. If you ask me, some parents put too much pressure on their children. So whatever you answer here, this is up to you. Those are your ideas. But I really would love for you to try to use these examples. Okay, work with it. Use any of these phrases to start your answer. And however you answer, that is up to you. Okay, you can pause your video and do number 2 until 6. Go ahead. Okay, amazing. This brings us back to the beginning of our lesson today, and quick review because we've come to the end of this video already. As our recap, we started with our vocabulary, which was like a review of all the vocabulary that we used in Unit 1 for listening and speaking, and it focused also on POS, which is part of speech, how one word from a noun can be changed into a verb, an adjective, or an adverb, and that adjectives modify nouns and adverbs modify verbs. Then we went on to trying to use the correct form of the word in a context. We also looked at the meaning, the word connected to the definition. And after that, I ask you to be opinionated about something. And also, always when you give your opinion, always back it up with reasons. Our grammar, we focused on the passive voice, remembering that we have the active voice and the passive voice. The active voice focuses on the doer, the agent, and the passive voice focuses on the receiver or the activity that is being done. Therefore, that is mostly the objective, and to form the passive, we mostly use that objective in the beginning of our sentence. If you formulate a passive form, please remember that you always have to add the verb be, which in the present is MSR, in the past is was, were, in the continuous is being, in the perfect tense it is be, been, and in the future tense it is be, plus the word will. Now, remember, if you form the passive voice, you always have to use the correct form of the verb be, which depends on the tense of the active voice. If the active voice is in the present, then in the passive voice, your verb be is also in the present. If, for example, your active voice is in the past continuous, then in the passive form, you will have to use the verb be form of the past continuous, okay? So use the correct form of the verb be, and the verb changes into the past participle, which is verb 3. Exactly. That's how we create the passive voice. Add verb be plus past participle. Exactly. But there is a difference with the models such as can, may, and should. To change that into a passive voice, we just use the base form of the past participle, means you use be, just as be, plus the past participle. Okay, and that led us into our pronunciation. Sometimes we can reduce auxiliary verbs. Those are helping verbs. We can reduce them, contract them to make them shorter. And for that, we use apostrophes like I am, I'm, I have, I've. Those contractions we can use in our speaking, which makes it more informal. Well, in speaking, that is okay. In writing, we would not want to use that. And the speaking scale, stating your opinion, which is totally fine, always remembering that you state it correctly and with respect, that you always have to respect other people's opinions. And, well, sometimes it's better not to state your opinion because you don't want an argument. Stating your opinion, offering an opinion, agree, disagree, and not giving an opinion. There are different ways on how to do that in a right way. And you can also report someone else's opinion while you are stating yours. Either to add to it, agreeing, or to contrast because you do not agree. Awesome work. You did great today. It was quite a long time together, but we finished it finally. And I will see you again soon. Take care, God bless you, and stay excited. Bye.